All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar here at the Center for Climate Protection. This webinar is titled Charging Up Electric Vehicles at Work, Show Me the Money. My name is Doron. I am the EV Program Manager here at the Center for Climate Protection, and we've got some great speakers, and I see a number of attendees starting to hop on board, so I want to welcome all of you who are participating in this webinar. Thank you so much. What we're going to do here, I'll give you just a quick overview, is I'm going to do a quick introduction to the topic.
Did you share your screen?
Let me just, yes, thank you, share my screen. Thank you for reminding me. There we go. All right, I would expect that everyone can now see the welcome slide. Welcome, Charging Up Electric Vehicles at Work. So first I'm going to do a little quick introduction, and then we're going to have our speakers in turn each make a presentation with some slides, after which we'll have time for questions and answers. So if you have questions, you can type them in your dialog box, or you can ask them when we get to the Q&A portion of this webinar. So here we go. I would like to first mention we have three groups presenting. One is PG&E. We have Will Quinn and Jaime Collard, who are EV specialists at PG&E's Electric Vehicle Charge Network program. We'll then be hearing from Mark Tang, and then we'll be hearing from Tina Montgomery from SOMO Village in Rohnert Park, who's going to talk about the case study of their workplace and the EV charging that they installed. I just want to mention that this program is being put on in collaboration by the Center for Climate Protection and our partners at the Regional Climate Protection Authority. I want to thank the folks at RCPA for engaging with us on this important work. We are doing this as part of a collaborative funded by the California Energy Commission. So I'd like to send a shout out to the California Energy Commission for funding this work and helping us advance workplace charging here in Sonoma County. Couple of items of housekeeping before we launch. This webinar is being recorded, so you and others will be able to download and listen to the recording at any time. Everyone who is participating is in listen-only mode. You can enter your questions in your control panel at any time, and we'll have time for Q&A in the last 10 to 15 minutes. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a live question at the time, or best to just type them into the dialog box. So we recommend that everyone type in their questions, and we'll make sure that all those questions get answered to the best of our ability given our time constraints. I also want to mention there's a couple of handouts that we received from our participants. Bay Area Air Quality Management District has provided a nice flyer on their program, and PG&E has some great handouts. Those are available to you for download at any time, as well as the entire slide deck. So don't feel like you need to scribble down notes furiously. It's all going to be available for download at your convenience. The subject of today's webinar is EV workplace charging. In a nutshell, how can businesses get funding to support installation of EV chargers, and what are the benefits? I'm going to leave most of that discussion to our presenters. I will just mention one thing, that this is all based on the fact that the way we get around is changing. Electric cars, hybrid cars, self-driving cars, Uber, Lyft, and more are disrupting the way we drive, and big part of that is the quick rise of electric vehicles. There's a lot of data and stats on this subject. I'm going to leave that, however, to our presenters to discuss. So I'd like to begin by asking Will Quinn and Jaime Collard from PG&E to talk about their program, the EV Charge Network program, and I'm going to turn it over to you now, Will and Jaime. I'm going to give you control of.
Great, thanks so much for the intro. Let me just double check.
You want him to click in there so he's got control.
If you click onto the screen.
Yep, no control yet.
Click in your screen.
Try clicking on the screen, and then you should be able to advance. Oh, I see a mouse moving. That's good news.
That's not mine. Was that yours?
Okay, great. There we go. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks so much for your interest in joining this presentation this morning. This is Will Quinn from PG&E on our EV Charge Network program. I've been a program manager on this team for 2 years now. and along with my colleague here, Jaime. If you want to introduce yourself, Jaime.
Guys, thanks for joining the call and the webinar. I'm super excited to partner with Sonoma County on this. I am an electric vehicle specialist, account manager for PG&E, and we'll be presenting our slides. Thanks.
Great. So right off the bat, we'll be discussing our EV Charge Network program in particular. This is our level 2 charging program. We're going to walk through what the program is, how it works, and then how you can get started with it if you're interested. So as was referenced earlier, electric vehicles really are on the rise throughout the nation, but especially in California. Last year, 10% of all new vehicle sales in our service territory were electric. We currently have more than 200,000 EVs registered in our service territory alone, more than 500,000 actually across the state now. And it's forecast that there'll be more than 5 million on the road by 2030. Our program in particular was designed and approved by our regulator, the CPUC, to install 7,500 level 2 charging stations over a 3-year period. Last year was our first year, and we'll be continuing this program for the next 2 years. We're targeting in particular multi-unit housing complexes and workplaces such as yourselves, and we help cover a lot of the project costs associated with installing charging stations. We're particularly interested in sites that can accommodate more than 10 level 2 chargers. This is to maintain the cost effectiveness of the program, since it is a ratepayer funded program. And site hosts have the option of either owning the charging stations themselves, what we call the charge owner option, or having PG&E own those charging stations on their behalf in certain instances, and we call that charge sponsor. Participants can choose from a set of 18 approved vendors, which are located on our website. And we handle all of the design, permitting, construction, and activation of the charging stations on your behalf. Really a turnkey program. And a lot of people don't realize just how significant the make-ready costs can be for installing a large number of new EV chargers. And so to have PG&E come in and scope out and cover the cost of all that make-ready can be substantial. And we'll cover that in the later slides. We see a variety of benefits to the program that show up in different ways for different stakeholders and different customers. Certainly if you're a business, being able to provide this amenity for your either tenants or customers that are visiting is increasingly important in the California market. There's a perception of increased property value. Certain emissions reductions are increasingly important in California, and transportation alone accounts for more than 40% of our GHG emissions in California. And again, the upgrade that we're providing is valued at often over $100,000 in terms of the overall upgrades that we're handling. Specifically, we're covering what we call the make-ready infrastructure. So this is everything from the electric pole to the parking space. So the transformer, a panel upgrade, and then conduit and wiring to that parking space itself. Then the stub off to the EV level 2 charger itself is that decision point where you can either decide to own it yourself and maintain that charger for the 10 years of the program, or have PG&E own it and maintain it for the 10 years. We're effectively covering 60 to 80% of total project costs through the program. Historically, our design and construction times, once we finally get all of the contracts out of the way and preliminary designs in place, can be handled within a couple months. But I should say we've received a lot of interest in this program in our first year of operation. We like to call it a kind of a good news problem. We've received more than 650 applications to date, totaling more than 11,000 level 2 charging stations for our program. So we are currently evaluating that backlog, and I can confidently state that if you submitted an application tomorrow, you would not be constructed in 2019 because of how much interest we have received in the program. That said, you would still hear from an onboarding specialist within 2 weeks, and they would walk you through all the expectations for the program, if your site seems like a good fit or not, and then follow up with next steps. But I do want to set that expectation properly that due to the very high demand in the program, new applications won't be constructed until next year. The variety of different ways you can estimate the savings, I would encourage you to visit the website referenced below and enter your individual information. We have a variety of rebates for the chargers themselves that can kick in depending on who you are and where you are. If you're a multi-unit dwelling, the rebate differs from if you're a workplace. And if you're located in a disadvantaged community, as defined by the Cal Enviro Screen 3.0, then you qualify for a higher rebate as well. So the best way is to use that calculator to estimate your cost, and you'll get a good sense of exactly how much potential savings you could be receiving by enrolling in the program. Good things to keep in mind before you click apply. Think about if you'd like to own the charging stations or if you'd like us to. Think about the right location for the chargers in your parking lot. You probably don't know where the transformer is on your property, but that is a really big consideration for us, is the distance from the nearest transformer to the parking space that you're interested in. As you can imagine, the more trenching we need to do and conduit we need to lay just increases cost significantly. So we do see that as one of the largest overall costs. And we are evaluating sites on a cost effectiveness basis. So, you know, if we needed to go 600 feet to trench from a transformer to a parking space, then that site wouldn't be as desirable or as likely to proceed as something that was maybe a couple hundred feet. We do also maintain an easement for the transformer itself. If you have a transformer on site already, this isn't an issue. We use the existing easement that's already in place with PG&E. If we would need to install a new transformer for the first time, then we would need a new easement to be in place for that transformer specifically. Another thing to keep in mind is to get the right decision makers in the room early on, right? So often if you're a tenant, then your owner of the property may be someone else, and they'll ultimately need to be the one signing the terms and conditions and contract to allow this infrastructure and chargers to be on site for the full 10 years. Last thing I would just encourage you all to do is fill out the application itself. It's not too rigorous, pretty easy to fill out once you know your PG&E account number, which you can get off of your bill. And like I said, within a couple weeks, an account manager will be reaching out to you to discuss next steps. We do have a lot of demand for the program, like I said, but never want to discourage people from applying in the case that we do find a really, attractive site and a good partnership. And we're just, so excited to be able to support these communities and get more chargers in the ground. It's really a win-win-win for all parties involved. So thanks so much. There's our website that gives a summary of the program at large. There were some handouts that were included in the meeting notes that'll be circulated afterwards. I would also like to make a plug for our EV savings calculator, which was included in the handouts. It's ev.pge.com. This calculator helps you identify a good electric car for you or your friends or family or coworkers to buy. It aggregates all the available incentives in the market based on your zip code and your personal income, household characteristics, those types of things, and shows you, how much range you would need depending on your commute. A lot of great features inside that tool. So I'd really recommend checking that out while you're thinking about EV charging. That's ev.pge.com. And with that, I'll hand it back to our host here and off to the next presenter, and happy to answer any questions at the end about our program. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Will. We really appreciate that. That was a great overview. I am now going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mark Tang from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And Mark, you should have control of the slides now. Looks like it is. So I'd like to turn it over to Mark.
Okay, great. Thank you, Doran. Let's see if this is going to work. There we go. All right. So my name is Mark, and I am one of the lead staff on the light duty EV programs here at the Air District. So thank you for having me here today. I did want to go quickly into some background on who we are, as we may not be as famous as PG&E. So we are the regional agency responsible for regulating stationary sources of air pollution in the Bay Area. We were established in 1955, and we cover, including Sonoma County, the 9 other counties of the Bay Area. Let's see. There we go. So I want to go over why we're interested in EVs at the Air District. From this chart, you can see that more than 50% of our air pollution does come from the transportation sector. So we see that adopting more zero-emission vehicles is a really great way to pick the lowest hanging fruit to accomplish some of our air quality goals. And in terms of planning for the future, we did release a plug-in electric vehicle readiness plan in 2013, which identified some goals that we are trying to hit in terms of EV adoption, and those are 110,000 EVs by 2020 and 247,000 EVs by 2025 in the Bay Area. This also aligns really well with the governor's office. They've also mandated some goals for EV adoption across the states. And looking further out, our goal, a long-term goal, is to transition the Bay Area's fleet to zero-emission vehicles of at least 90% by 2050. And so this slide shows where we are at in terms of EV adoption. You can see the dotted line on this chart shows our goal, and the light blue bars show our actual adoption. So we're actually ahead of our Air District goals in terms of adoption, but what you don't see here is projections further out. We do anticipate that our goal curve will dramatically increase to hit that 2050 goal of 90% zero-emission vehicles. So we do recognize that we're ahead of the game now, but we will likely have a big challenge ahead of us. On the opposite side, one of the barriers to EV adoption is the presence of a publicly accessible charge network. So I know all of us are really interested in trying to get chargers out there and available so people don't have that range anxiety. This chart shows kind of where we're at. As of late 2018, we had about 6,600 publicly accessible chargers in the Bay Area. The green section is a high and low range of where we expect our projected needs to support our growing EV adoption here in the Bay Area. So you can see we're at the very bottom of that scenario, and that's going to increase as we get more EV adoption. We're going to need more EV chargers in the Bay Area. So that's really what the charge program, what I'll be talking about, was created to address. I'm going to skip this one, but this just shows where all the public charging is in the Bay Area. So in terms of the charge program, we do, I know this webinar is focused more on workplace charging, but we do allow applicants to place them in different facility categories, including some of the ones you see on here. And in terms of the previous charge, we've operated this program since 2016. We just reopened the 2019 program in last October, and these stats on the screen right now show our 2017-2018 metrics. And as you can see, workplace and destination charging comprise the majority of our funding that we allocated. So it's really a great place. We're seeing a lot of uptake, and as Will mentioned earlier, there's a lot of advantages to having chargers installed at workplaces and destination type facilities. This chart is probably the most important in terms of funding. Unlike the PG&E program, our funding is fixed to the number of chargers and types of chargers that you'll be installing. So we'll cover level 1 at $750, a level 2 up to $3,000 per unit, and for a DC fast charger, we'll cover up to $18,000 per unit. I also want to highlight here we have something called a usage requirement, and that requirement is the amount of energy that must be delivered over a 3-year period. So if you do take our funding and you do use it to install some chargers, then we expect over a 3-year period for the minimum energy described on this chart to be delivered during that 3-year period. And so that usage requirement is a little different from a lot of other programs. So I did want to go a little more deeper into what that means and how that relates to your annual or daily energy delivery or how usage of those chargers. So if you look at a level 2, that equates, the usage requirement equates to about using that charger about 3 hours a day. And that's just counting Monday through Friday. So just want to put that in perspective. The 14,700 kilowatt hours sounds high, but that's equivalent to about 3 hours of charging per day. In addition to the base funding I just mentioned earlier, we do have additional funding called Plus Up funding, and this is really to encourage additional types of projects that take advantage of co-locating new solar installations. So we can give additional dollar per watt installed up to $4,000 if you are planning a solar component to your charger project. If you are doing multi-ports, so usually we see for level 2s, you'll either install a single port or a dual port. If you're doing a dual port, we can offer an additional $1,000, bringing up the total for level 2 to $4,000 per unit. We also have a transportation corridor, and that's if your workplace is close to a heavy used expressway, highway, or freeway. And you do have and those chargers are available 24/7, 365 days a year. Then we can give an additional $7,000 if your workplace is located within that criteria. And this is for DC fast chargers, so that would bring the total funding for a DC fast charger up to $25,000. And lastly, we also do multi-dwelling units. This is mostly focused on workplaces, but if you are interested or have any other colleagues that might be interested, we can offer additional funding per charger if it's located at a multi-dwelling unit. So this is some of the key sponsors' obligations if you do apply through our program. We do require that station installations are completed within 12 months of contract execution between us and the applicant or grantee. Of course, use the licensed contractor within the state of California, obtain and maintain insurance. And you'll also be required to submit reports over a 3-year period. So I mentioned the usage requirements earlier. In order to track that usage, we will require an annual report just to track how much energy is being delivered on an annual basis to make sure there's no issues there. And the last item on here is since this is public funded dollars, you may be requested to participate in a fiscal audit of the actual program. So this is not audit of your business, it's an audit of just the documentation applicable to this grant. It looks like I might have lost connection to the slides. Yeah, thank you. So this is a charge operates under a 3-step process. So we have the apply, you'll apply through an online application, install the chargers, and at the end of the installation period, we'll receive a report from you letting us know you finished installation, and we will reimburse 85% of the award that we have granted you. And then for the next 3 years after that, you'll be in the operation phase where you'll be submitting annual operating reports. And at the end of the 3-year period, we'll reimburse the last 15% of that grant award. Looks like I can't advance anymore. Oh, there, I see. Okay, and then the program schedule, I mentioned the timeline for when the chargers should be installed. It's 1 year after contract execution, and they'll be operating for 3 years after that. This is a reimbursement program, so keep that in mind as you'll need to have the funds up front to pay for the actual installation and the hardware. Applications are received on a first-come, first-served basis, and we're open until June 30th, 2019, or until our funds are exhausted sooner. So if you do have a project ready to go, I do highly recommend that you apply sooner rather than later. As we get closer to June, we do see a large uptick in the amount of applications that we receive. As part of the charge program, we do require you to attend a webinar, and we go into a little more details on what the obligations are and the funding amounts. It gives you a little more detail into how to apply and how to implement the project. So the next webinar will be April 18th, 2019. We have 2 more scheduled after that. And so that's it for the charge program. I kind of quickly went through that, but I'm happy to answer any questions. My contact information is also on the screen here. So happy to also answer questions offline later on if those come up. And for your reference, the online application is available at the website that's listed on the chart on the slide right here. So with that, I will hand it back over.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was a great overview of the program. What we're going to do now is move to the next portion of the program, and I want to cue this up for all of the people who are listening in. We've heard from the people who are offering the grants and offering the assistance. I thought it would be useful to hear from someone who has received the grants and received the assistance. There are a number of projects that are already in the ground and operational all around the Bay Area, funded both by PG&E, such as down at the Marin Civic Center, and many of them funded by the Air District. And one of those is the SOMO Village in Rohnert Park. And I would like to invite Tina Montgomery, who works there and has been responsible for this program, to present a little bit of their experience of receiving the grants and installing the chargers. So I'd like to turn it over to Tina now. You should have control of the screen, Tina, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dron. As Dron mentioned, my name is Tina Montgomery, and I'm the general manager at SOMO Village. And yes, we have been through the program. We've been through the Bay Area Air Quality Management District program, the CHARGE program, and I can share a little bit of our experience about that. So just to give you a little bit of, oh, sorry about that, I went too far. Still too far. There we go. Thank you. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, SOMO Village is located in Rohnert Park, and it's a different type of community. This is a community that's under redevelopment, with a home and a work lifestyle focus on what we think matters most: health, happiness, and high quality living. It's located on 200 acres, and we have about 600,000 square feet of commercial space, which is in those large buildings that you see covered with the solar. We have about 40 businesses, about 1,500 employees on site. That solar that you see is about 3 megawatts, and we also have a 1 megawatt battery storage system that offsets our peak demand, and that's was important to our funding, which I'll go into in just a few minutes. We do have plans, the sea of parking that you see surrounding the buildings. We do have plans for 1,450 homes of all types, and the entire redevelopment is guided by the 10 principles of One Planet Living. So just to talk to you a little bit about One Planet Living. So for us, our redevelopment is important because we are understanding that globally we are consuming resources and polluting the planet at an unsustainable rate. So living a happy, healthy lifestyle within our fair share of the Earth's resources, that's what One Planet Living is about. And these are the 10 principles under which we will develop our community and have operated our community already. We were the first One Planet community in North America. There's also communities in Seattle, Canada, East Africa, Western Australia, the UK, and also an Eco Disney resort called Village Niger in Paris. So just kind of lays some of the groundwork as to why the travel and transport principle and the encouraging of low carbon transportation was so important to us. So when we started our program, we started with one dual port charger. It was a cute program. We created a group of EV users on the campus. We texted and emailed each other when we needed to charge, so one could move, and if it was more critical for somebody to charge, we'd text and reach out to each other. It was kind of a fun community building program, but we only had one charger at that time. So in our experience with the Charge program, in partnership with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, in August of 2016, we installed 2 DC fast and 7 Tier 2 charging stations for a total of 16 charging ports. Because of the solar that I mentioned earlier and because of the battery storage that we have, we were actually able to receive funding for 95% of the cost. That does not include networking fees. It does not include a few things, but we were able to really get some great funding due to that solar capacity. We do have to, as Mark had mentioned, there are processes with it. We do file annual reports. We do track what the usage is, and we chose to work with the ChargePoint program system, and that system, all those reports, et cetera, that we need in order to meet the requirements for the funding and provide for reporting, et cetera, are all available through the ChargePoint system. So there really isn't anything that I have to manage much, quite honestly. I just have to go onto the ChargePoint system, download the data, and get it into the format for the reporting forms. And that's not a terribly difficult process, quite honestly. So I also wanted just to point out to everyone listening that I am not a grant writer. I did write the grant for the Charge program from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, but I'm not a grant writer. I did get some help, obviously, from staff here and from our chief financial officer on the calculations for the solar generation, because that was, to me, the most complicated part. So I did get some assistance there in-house on that, but I was able to apply for the grant without much difficulty, quite honestly. Part of, again, just going back to the goals and the values of SOMO Village is about lifestyle and about health and happiness. So those charging stations, we have had them, like I said, since 2016. We've had them on a free basis. We went to a fee basis for a little while. We're back to free again, but they are open to the public. They're also obviously for the workplace and the workforce here, but they're also open to the public community after hours. We are not a gated community or anything, so they are used overnight as well, sometimes by the neighbors, which we of course don't mind. So that goes into our goals and values, of course, of just being a good neighbor. But it also, we think, really helped us to attract companies, because part of our goals are obviously to attract companies and provide jobs. We are a commercial property, and it is important that we support our community with equity and value. So we feel that those charging stations actually were helpful in attracting some of the tenants that we have. We have a high school on site. We have Credo High School. We have Sonoma State University coming on site. We have a traditional medicinals wellness tea company who uses the chargers probably the most, because that, again, aligns with their goals and values as a company. So we feel that they really have helped us to attract tenants. They've helped us in the community by providing an amenity to the community. And right now, our property is about 84% leased. So again, I think that just speaks to the success. It also speaks to some of the awards that the community has been able to garner, with Best Places to Work, with the Healthiest Employer Award for the Bay Area, Fit Friendly San Francisco. And then also we are part of the U.S. Green Building Council's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design for Neighborhood program, and this project is a platinum project plan, so it assists us in that realm too. So that's just to highlight some of the value that we feel that the workplace chargers brought, specifically to SOMO Village.
Well, thank you very much, Tina. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with workplace charging, and I'm happy to hear the great reports coming out of your community and what you've been able to accomplish there. We have concluded our formal presentations a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great, which means we have plenty of time for questions and answers. I know that most of the folks who logged in are still on the line, so I encourage all of you to type your questions in. And if you have any questions, now is a good time. We've got about 20 minutes remaining, a little bit more perhaps. If we need it, we're going to end right on time. But in the meantime, I'd like to encourage everyone to ask questions. I'll start by asking Nina. Nina, we got any questions coming in so far?
Yeah, we have a few, and I could start posing them right now.
Okay.
One of the first ones here is for, I think, our first two presenters to answer. How will ADA requirements affect deployment of the EV infrastructure in California going forward?
That's a great question.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sure, I'll take it. This is Will Quinn at PG&E. I'll take a crack at it first. We do scope out all ADA requirements for our site and conduct that as part of our permitting process. If you had a privately accessible dedicated parking space for a single, this is more applicable to a multi-unit dwelling, single tenant, then ADA is not required in that instance. Also, if it's behind a closed fence, not available to the public, and again, a dedicated parking space for potentially like a fleet vehicle that an employer owns, ADA is not required in that instance. But if you are having publicly accessible charging or multiple employees using those parking spaces, then ADA requirements are triggered, and we do follow those codes very closely in our design and permitting process.
Mark, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So from our grant program, we unfortunately do not provide technical assistance with developing your site plan and where your chargers will go. So I didn't mention this on the webinar, but we have had people that do co-fund with the PG&E program. It's worked really well because PG&E is able to provide that assistance. But if you were to just go with us, we would have you as the grantee be responsible for identifying what the local regulations are in terms of ADA compliance.
Okay. Great. Tina, do you have anything to add from your experience? Was ADA an issue for you at SOMO Village when you installed your chargers?
It was not. We have a construction company as well, so we were able to work with them to ensure that we were ADA compliant. Of course, the spaces that some of the charging stations are adjacent to some of the disabled parking spaces, so there is the ability potentially for the person parking in that space to be able to use the charger. We intentionally did that.
Great. Excellent question. Nina, what else do we have coming in?
Okay, I think this is for you, Tina, specifically. What kind of permitting did Sonoma Mountain Village have to go through for those EV chargers?
Sure. We just went through standard permitting. We hired an electrical contractor who ran the power, et cetera, to the units. So he got the permit that was required.
Okay.
That's great. Before we continue to the next question, I'd perhaps like to ask Will to address on PG&E issues, on PG&E funded programs. You do provide assistance with permitting. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. So we handle all the designs and permits. It varies from city to city and county to county, as you would imagine, in terms of difficulty and timelines. It can be as fast as 3 or 4 weeks and as long as 6 to 8 weeks for approval of those permits.
Wonderful. And I want to just add that here in Sonoma County, the Regional Climate Protection Authority, our partners on this project, have been working closely with local permitting officers to help streamline the process. So if there's any issues that come up, you guys can always contact me, and I can put you in touch with the folks at our CPA so we can make sure that no one receives any, that everything goes smoothly. So Nina, what else are people asking?
Okay, this question was asked twice so far. Do these programs apply to workplace charging for public agencies? Is this just businesses, or can public agencies use this as well?
I'll start off again if that's all right. Wilquin PG&E. Public agencies can apply for these programs, and there is no publicly accessible requirement for our programs either. In our experience, a public accessible site will have a higher utilization, and so we do encourage that when possible. But a multi-unit housing, a government organization, or a workplace has the prerogative to limit that to their own employees.
And this is Mark from the Air District. Our program is intended for publicly accessible chargers, but we do have case-by-case exemptions for those specific facility types that are behind a gate or are not accessible. We just want to make sure that if we do install chargers at those locations, that they will be utilized. So we would just double check to make sure that there's a community of EVs at that facility that would be using those chargers.
Great. And I have a question, and hold on, I'm going to interject with one question that I got specifically from Mark. The question for you, Mark, is what happens if someone installs the chargers but don't meet the usage requirements as outlined in your slides?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we can extend our contract by an additional year. So we do give you 3 years to meet that usage requirement. And if it's not made within that 3 years, we can extend it by a year. If you decide not to do that, or you still are unable to meet that usage requirement, unfortunately, we do have to proportionately prorate your grant award. So if you delivered 50% of the usage requirement, then at the end of the project, we would only be able to expend 50% of the grant funds awarded to your project. We'll do everything we can to try to monitor your sites as we move through the years to ensure that doesn't happen. But it is, publicly funding money, so we do want to make sure that we're using it in the way it was intended to.
Of course. So I have 2 follow-ups, one for you, Mark, and then I want to ask a question of Tina in this regard. But the question for you, Mark, is have you guys had that happen a lot, or is that a rare instance?
So far we have not had that happen, mostly because the charge program just started in 2016, so most of our grantees have not hit that stage of final evaluation. I can say that the first year of charging will tend to be less than your second and third year because for a variety of factors, but also because if it's a new site, people are not as aware of that charger. But once more adoption occurs, we have seen that those charging sites, the older ones, start to get utilized a little more. So we will monitor that. We haven't been in that situation yet, and hopefully we won't have to.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. I'd like to just perhaps have Tina comment on this, because I know from conversations that you might be able to address the issue of what happens in terms of the number of electric vehicles among a population of employees after the first chargers are installed. Could you perhaps talk about that? I'm not sure if Tina's still on the line.
Sorry, I am on the line. Sorry, I was muted. Sorry about that. No, we've seen an increase in electric vehicles by the workforce. Initially, like I said, we had that cute little program where we'd email each other, and we actually had a little contact list that went around. It was quite fun. And I had an EV at that point, so I was part of that group. So it was small, and now with the tenants that we're attracting and the like-minded, aligned kind of businesses that seem to be attracted to coming to SOMO Village, we've had a tremendous increase in the electric vehicles that actually charge here daily while people are at work, whether it's at the high school and the teachers and sometimes the students at the high school, or whether it's the employees at AT&T, or whether it's the employees at traditional medicinals who really have the same kind of value. It's across the board a tremendous increase in the amount of EVs that we see on site.
Great. That's I think that's been the experience of a lot of businesses who've installed charging is, it's kind of a positive feedback loop. Chicken breeds the egg, so to speak, and onward. All right, Nina, do we have other questions coming in? I have a couple others here, but I'm wondering what else you're seeing on the chat.
Yeah, we have a decent amount of questions here. I don't think we'll be able to get through all of them, but I will try to get through as many as we can here. One is, what are the numbers of percentage of EV charging stations funded by grants that have solar power? And does the solar complicate things when it comes to the grants?
I'll take a crack first. We install a separate meter for our charging stations at PG&E, so a solar asset would actually not be eligible to show up on that same meter. It would need to be metered separately, and so we do kind of wall off the chargers, if you will, to be an isolated load.
Okay, and Mark, you might have a different answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers of the number of grantees that have taken advantage of the solar components. It does come up pretty often, and we have done a few solar projects. They do tend to take a little longer because those projects by nature are just a little more complicated when you're starting to talk about interconnectivity and adding a new load onto the grid. So they do take a little longer. We are flexible. I mentioned that we have a 1-year implementation from the contract execution, and sometimes, things happen in construction. So we are appreciative of that, and we have some flexibility.
Okay, this next one is specifically for PG&E. If we need to upgrade site equipment under the PG&E EV charge program, such as a transformer, will PG&E cover those costs under this program? And how long will adding a new transformer delay the charging project installation?
Yes, that is the core objective of the program, is to cover all those costs. Everything that we call make ready, so the transformer, conduit and wiring, panel upgrades, and it wouldn't really change overall construction timeline too much. Like I mentioned earlier, if you submitted an application tomorrow, it likely wouldn't be until 2020 the construction would actually occur. But once we have all the approvals in place, permits in place, and we're actually constructing, it's about 2 months is how long actual construction takes.
Great, thank you, Will. Nina?
Yes, so this next one is for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. What happens when charger technology improves drastically in the next 2 years? Do the grants with the chargers become obsolete because people stop using them? Are there other ways to go about using this new technology with these grants as they roll in?
So yeah, I don't think that they necessarily will be obsolete in the fact that they won't be used. Charger technology is improving, and we're seeing higher power chargers. And our program is designed to kind of adapt to the evolving technology that's being placed out there. So when we started the program, we may not include DC fast chargers, and now that's one of our funding options. So we do adapt to that. But I think that if you do have an older charger and you install it now, it still will be used because there will still be a need for chargers across all types of use cases. So if someone's at a workplace that needs charging for 4 hours versus someone that stops by for 20 minutes, there will still be a need for that charger type.
Can I pop in for a second?
Please, go ahead, Tina.
I just wanted to share also that with ChargePoint as basically the technology behind the charging stations that we have at SOMO Village, they have outreach to me. We have an old charging station, one that we had installed originally before the 2016 dates, that we moved to a different location here just for in-house use. But they've been outreaching to me about the potential to upgrade that to one of the newer versions with a reduced cost to kind of upgrade it. And so I just wanted to let people know that there's also potentially that opportunity. It will cost money, of course, but it seems like there's an incentive sometimes from the charging station companies to incentivize us to upgrade those.
That's great. That's great feedback from the user side. Thank you so much for that, Tina. And Mark also. Nina, what else we got? We got about 10 minutes, so let's see if we can get through all these questions.
Okay, so this one is for Tina. Can you please add a little bit more insight about your decision to move back to free charging? Were there pros or cons that you experienced?
We put up, thank you for that question. We put up signage. There were some growing pains with it for sure when we first started. We were able to create a couple of different platforms for fee and non-fee based. We were able to give our own workforce a code to be able to have free charging and still charge public charging. So if they were on the access cards, they would actually be able to get free charging. So you can set up a couple of different fee structures within the platform at ChargePoint. You can do it for fee for certain hours. You can do it at a cap fee. You can, again, allow certain groups free charging. But we went back and forth between free, started at free, did a fee-based for a while, saw some good value there, but then went back to the free, primarily because it's not really about the making money on charging for us. It's more about the community benefit of charging. So we've gone back to free just to allow charging primarily after hours as well with the neighborhoods. So I haven't yet seen that data of what the charging looks like from when we've moved to the fee-based to the free again, because it's been relatively new. But I'll be curious to see that.
That's interesting, and Tina, I would definitely be interested in seeing that data. I'm curious what kind of data Mark has, and this is something we would probably continue conversation offline. And of course, anybody who has additional questions, we're always available offline. But I have seen some studies that show that when charging is offered for free, you get longer dwell times. The vehicles spend more time parked at the chargers beyond when they need to, so that charging for chargers kind of keeps the vehicles moving. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys have experimented with different scenarios, and would be interested to see what comes out of your latest shift in charging for charging, or not charging for charging.
Right, I know, and we did put up signage with a 4-hour max, active charging only. But we also don't police it terribly hard, and it's we would never tow a car out of a charging station,
right.
Parking spot. But yeah, it's it'll be a bit to manage. We'll see how it looks when it's back to the free.
Very interesting. All right, Nina, what else do we have here in our waning minutes?
So somewhat of a follow-up question to this, does anyone know about the tax implications of offering free EV charging to employees? Is it considered a fringe benefit?
Who wants to take that? Anyone want to take that?
This is Tina. I can't speak to the tax benefit of it. I mean, it's definitely an amenity and definitely a perk for the employees to have free charging.
So I can say something general about this, although I'm not an expert in this subject, but I do know that this is more of an issue for public employers and less of an issue for private employers. So in some cases, public employers may find that in order to avoid any perception of inequity, it is better to simply charge for the juice. And that way people are paying for the benefit and not receiving it for free, which would enable other people to perhaps feel that they're not being fairly treated. But that is a decision that would be made at the individual public agency. I don't think there's yet a universal standard for that particular issue. But again, in public contexts, it's going to perhaps be a little thornier than in the context of a private employer.
Yeah, And Doron, I remember when I was looking at the grant funding, I ended up getting on some mailing lists, for grant opportunities. And I think that it might have been with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, but I'm not quite sure. But there were definite allocations for private versus public, and there were definite distinct lanes for funding.
Right.
I don't know if it's still the case, but that was the case when we were looking at this funding resource back in 2016. There were two totally separate lanes. Like, I would see a lot of funding available, but it was only for public. So of course then I ignored that, and then as soon as I saw private, that's the one I would jump on. But I don't know if that's still the case. I would just throw that out there.
That's good. That's good. Mark, is it still the case? I know this program, Charge program, is available to both public and private entities, but do you have other programs that are specific to one or the other?
Yes, that's correct. So we do have some programs that are specifically targeted towards public agencies that are not available to private citizens. So yeah, just keep an eye out for that. We try to do that just to public agencies sometimes are administered a little differently in terms of timelines and what they can and can't do. So that's why sometimes we separate them out.
Okay, great. We've just got a couple minutes left, so Nina, let's see if we can squeeze in another question or two.
Okay, so this one is, what's the typical charger cost? What assumptions can we use when calculating the rate of return and payback period for chargers?
Cost and payback, good questions. I don't know, Will, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I have some comments. It does range pretty widely, and we give those ranges on our website. We calculate the base cost for a level 2 charger at $2,300 per port. That's the maximum incentive you can receive from us if you're a qualified customer for that. But anecdotally, I can say that it does range pretty widely, from as low as $1,000 per port for a commercial to maybe as high as $5,000 or $6,000 per port for a commercial charging station. And then the ROI question is also a difficult one. To maintain parity with gasoline prices, or to be cheaper than gasoline prices, if you maintained your electric rate and you were passing it through, it would be about half the cost of today's gas prices for your drivers. If you wanted to make that just a little bit cheaper than gasoline, which probably isn't a great thing to do if you want to encourage more people to drive EV, but say you were trying to make it pencil out or something of that nature, you could charge more for the drivers to use it. But in our experience, that does hurt your utilization and overall accessibility of the charger. So we definitely don't encourage that. I don't think this is a kind of conventional ROI calculation that you would be able to undertake in the same way that maybe you could a solar system. It's more about, I think, the tangential benefits at this stage, but I would be interested to hear others' thoughts as well, because it's entirely possible with all of these incentives in the market that there could be a economic argument to be made.
Does Tina or Mark have anything to add to the ROI discussion?
I don't. It was because of our values, we were able to make it pencil out. Not to mention we got quite a benefit just because of the amount of solar and the battery backup that we had. So I think we might have been a little bit of a unique case in the amount of funding we were able to get. I haven't actually put that question in that way to Mark, but I feel like we might have been an unusual case.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add. I think it's also, as Will mentioned, a little difficult to calculate sometimes, just because some sites are much more expensive to install charging at, depending on the current infrastructure. So I don't really have exact values in terms of, we don't really listen to that on the back end of applicants that come in. A lot of them do come in because they want to provide that amenity for their workforce.
Right. Okay. Well, I see we're mere seconds away from our closing time. So I first of all want to just take a moment to thank everybody who attended, and particularly our presenters. I know we may have some additional questions that came in. We will look through those, and we're happy to handle those offline. You can see on the screen right now both my phone number and my email address. I am available anytime and can connect you with the presenters. And if you want to download the slide deck through the handouts, I believe the presenters all provided contact information in there. And if you have any further questions, you're welcome to call me. So with that, we're here at noon. I want to thank everyone for attending our webinar here at the Center for Climate Protection. Thanks again to RCPA for helping sponsor this, California Energy Commission for providing the funding, and SOMO Village, PG&E, and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District for participating in this webinar. And with that, I want to thank you all and let you know this webinar is now officially over. Thank you so much.
Wow.
All right, I thank you all. I think we're done now.
Yep, good job.
Good job.
So, oh, yeah, no, so you need
All right, thank you.
to,
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Start clicking to get out. Yeah, there you go. Leave webinar and